Welcome back, trainers. I'm Tyson Hughes, joined here by Hayden McTavish, and we're here to wrap up the Victory Road side game special event, whatever we have going on over here. But it's the World Championships. We're wrapping it up here at round 8, and we're excited to bring to you the last round of Swiss here in our day 1, and it's been an amazing day of games here. We've covered 4 of them, with us here. Then our EU friends covered the first 4. We've had tons of games, and this is kind of the culmination of it all in day 1, and I'm super excited to get into it. Hayden, how are you feeling at the end of the day?
Out for this last game. I think the pressure is always mounting throughout the whole last part of the day when you're watching some of these big tournaments, and there's a lot of onus on players to keep playing well through these last few matches as the games just get harder and harder. And I think that we have just like a spectacular match to showcase. I'm really excited to be able to show that off. And I think as these players are all fully locked in their flow mode, I'm really excited to see this match show up.
Yeah, and we're going to get to see it relatively soon as we get a team sheet reveal here from both players, Luca Ceribelli and Carlos Cabal, both very talented players, both running also as well, I'd say pretty standard teams, but there's still a lot to cover here.
Yeah, absolutely. So really excited to be able to showcase Luca Ceribelli, taking after some other Italians and using a really powerful core here with Lunala and Miraidon, and of course the Calyrex Zamazenta. We do see that taunt on the Qian Pao from Carlos Cabal's side, which I think gives some interesting options for stopping a potential Trick Room. A few other variations that might mean that this is a little bit different than the way that this matchup sort of played out at the North American International Championships.
Yeah, and I think, again, a lot of the small things here that we notice, for example, the first thing that comes out to mind is on Carlos's team, we see Pollen Puff on Calyrex. Normally you have the Astral Barrage or Psychic, or even something like the Giga Drain or, Draining Kiss, but Pollen Puff is something new.
Yeah, I think there's a bunch of little changes on Carlos's team. There's the Pollen Puff, there's the Taunt, there's Helping Hand on the Ogre Pawn, which means that Astral Barrage can come out and do a lot of damage with the Life Orb too. Whimsicott has Fake Tears to set up a bunch of immediate pressure. Just a ton of little variations that are probably why Carlos is sitting at this comfortable 6-1 in the World Championships. With a whole lot of text that might be really useful in this matchup.
Yeah, and I think being able to navigate your way around both of their psychic ghost types is going to be a little bit difficult. Each team having their own way around it. Carlos having a Qian Pao, not having something like the Throat Chop though to immediately threaten the Lunala. You have to kind of, with a Sucker Punch, you have to hope the Lunala goes for an attack to hit into it. Lunala also having the Electric Seed there is going to be boosted against physical attacks, which could be pretty dangerous, which could also be good against Zamazenta, if you do decide to Terastallize as Lunala.
Yeah, I think my expectation is that Lunala will probably want to be a Fairy type for most of these matchups. It's just nice to not have to click Wide Guard versus the Calyrex Shadow Rider. But you're right, it sort of has an option to maybe not Terastallize because this Qian Pao can't really force any Dark type attacks until after it's gone for a taunt. So there's some interesting questions here about the best way to position Lunala in this game. But yeah, as you mentioned, the Electric Seed means it's really not threatened by a couple of the Pokemon on Carlos' side of the field. Carlos is really going to have to rely on maybe getting an Astral Barrage around the Wide Guard, maybe using that taunt, or just the old-fashioned way with a whole lot of damage from Raging Bolt to be able to take out that Lunala.
Yeah, and I think as well, we saw earlier, even something like the Ursaluna is a big damaging threat, especially into Carlos' team, where there isn't really resist, besides like the Zamazenta, maybe to the Facade. But other besides that, you really have to rely on something like Terra Ghost. So you really have to rely on something like Terra Ghost to maybe get around that, but that's not really something you want to terastallize in this matchup. Ursaluna seems like if you can get in position for Luca, can do so much damage into Carlos' team.
Yeah, definitely. We saw a stream match earlier that was showcasing Akatsuki Day really making use of that Lunala plus Ursaluna mode to be able to steamroll through a Calyrex Zamazenta team. I think there's a few tools Carlos has, even if he gets into that really tough situation. There's Follow Me on the Ogre Punch, maybe redirect some headlong rushes. There's still the opportunity to maybe Sucker Punch around a Ghost type Ursaluna, but things are definitely... it's definitely ideal for Carlos to keep Trick Room from ever going up, and I think that might be the game plan we're seeing. Just trying to pressure a lot of damage into the Lunala right away with Fake Tears from Whimsicott, trying to get a taunt off with the Qian Pao. But of course, if you focus too much on that Lunala, you're really opening things up for Luca to make use of his very comfortable Choice Specs Miraidon set that he won the World Championships with last year.
Yeah, absolutely. And I mean, I think you mentioned a little bit, we've been back and forth about it, but something like the taunt on the Chen Pal is going to be very important. And even something like, I think the Encore on Whimsicott is going to be very
Oh,
good, right? Because if Lunala does go for a move, you can Encore it as well. Taunt isn't the only way you have to get around these status moves. The only thing you can't Encore on this team is the Incineroar into like something like Fake Out. But being able to Encore and Taunt, having that flexibility really gives Carlos different tools in this matchup to kind of get around the devastating thing that is Trick Room.
yeah. See if Encore comes into play. Even just as a minor thing, like if Whimsicott is on the field when Lunala sets Trick Room, Lunala probably has to switch out and lose its Electric Seed boost. That's like a nice little pressuring option that Carlos will have. And I think also you could even just Encore Lunala into Wide Guard to stop it from going for Trick Room if it's trying to avoid the Calyrex damage. So there's a whole lot of like little subtle options that Carlos has on his side of the field that might be able to turn this matchup a little bit on its head. And I'm really curious to see how many of them come into play directly versus just being something extra for Luca to think about on the team sheet.
Yeah, and I think as well, like both of these being established teams, this is kind of the story of today is how can you change an established team to where it's not like some crazy tech, but still give you a upper hand maybe in either the mirror or into their matchups that you might be struggling with. And I think I'm really interested to see how Carlos's adjustments in like Pollen Puff or in like the taunt can really give them the upper hand in maybe this matchup. And Luca, I think being the other side of it is where just stick to what you know. Like Luca obviously doing really well with this team, being able to play it out and having the reps that he does with the team, having that mastery is sometimes better than having the tech or the quote unquote call for Worlds.
Yeah, absolutely. I think Worlds is the place where you want to be most familiar with your team because you're most likely to encounter brilliant players putting you in positions you're just not that comfortable with. And I think if there's anyone I trust to be able to play out of a bad situation with a Choice Specs Miraidon team that he's really familiar with, it would definitely be Luca Ceribelli. So I think being able to just go into this matchup knowing that there's a few tricks, but knowing that, hey, I trust my team, I know how to go into this, is definitely the game plan for Luca's side of the field.
Yeah, and I think for both these players as well, the amount of time that they've spent to get here, right? Both players are here at 7-0 at these tables. Their mental fatigue has definitely reached a all-time high if it's not already broken. I think it wouldn't be if they're here at 7-0, but both players being at this record really exemplify the mental fortitude that you need to make it to this stage of Worlds. Yes, you're in day 2, but the job's not done. You really need to make sure you round out today and do the best you can so that your day 2 looks a little bit better and that it's easier on yourself mentally and, record-wise.
Yeah, this is such a huge deal for both of these players sitting in this tournament at 6-1. If they can win here, then they only have to win one of the next 2 games, and they're so comfortably able to maybe not count on getting top cut, but they've got a good chance to. Whereas if you lose right now, still a better position than anyone who's being disqualified from the tournament, you just have to win 2 more rounds the next day. But there's no margin for error after this loss. And so both players, I think, are really hoping to set themselves up to get a good night's sleep, not being too stressed for tomorrow, sitting at that X-1 record, rather than needing to sort of prepare for effectively a last chance qualifier into top cut if they lose this game.
Yeah, absolutely. And I think as well, being able to have that is also like a sigh of release. Like, yes, we're talking about the anxiety that maybe comes from it and having this record and having to keep that up. But being also at this record is an accomplishment. You should celebrate a little bit. Even getting to 6-0 earlier is an accomplishment in of itself. Getting any wins, I feel like, at the World Championships is an accomplishment. Considering the level of play that you're dealing with and the consistency to keep it this entire time is no small feat at all.
Yeah, absolutely. Both of these players are, in every sense of the word, exceptional and phenomenal world-class players. And so both of them, even just sitting at 6-1, we know we're in for quite a treat with this match. I'm really excited to see how they choose to play this matchup. We've seen it before, this particular restricted matchup, in many different tournaments, but there's always new little variations of reads or plays or texts that players can jump in with that I think will make this continue to be really interesting. And both of these players are really going to be sort of looking for that one little like slight advantage or edge over the other player that they can find. to be able to sort of just solidify their position with only needing one more win for the next day.
Yeah, and I think I'm really excited. Again, like I keep mentioning this, but I want to really emphasize how both these players have kind of innovated on their teams and how they've really mastered their teams and kind of created a scenario where they really get to showcase, like that's the best way of putting it, is showcasing how they play the team, right? Because maybe how I play the Miraidon Lunala team might be totally different than how Luca plays, and seeing those refined game plans really come into fruition and then still be able to adapt on the fly to the new teams that might arise on Worlds is always so impressive to see.
Yeah, absolutely. And I think there's a huge question with how Luca approaches the match. There's sort of the standard four that I think might be most likely to bring, which involves bringing both the Lunala and the Ursaluna, maybe with an Incineroar. But there's also this whole Tailwind mode that Luca could totally pull out with the Whimsicott and the Urshifu. And I think that just introduces a ton of uncertainty in Carlos's game plans. Like knowing that Luca's going to be familiar with both of those approaches and that you might need different tools to handle each of them. Knowing that there's so many abilities to use this team in different ways. It's sort of like a Swiss Army knife of a bunch of different avenues for win conditions. It's really tough to hard counter that team or have a solid game plan, knowing that it just is built to have so much flexibility and really leverage the familiarity of the player using it.
And I think you put it best, having those array of tools, that Swiss Army knife, as you referred to it as, having that many tools in a matchup, and not only in terms of Pokemon, but in terms of mental as well. Like knowing your team so well that you can spend that extra brain power, recognizing maybe how your opponent wants to approach the game plan really does go miles. And having that small advantage over Carlos is what maybe, Luca might need in a matchup like this, or in, this stage of the World Championships. But also, to Carlos's favor, having the small things like Taunt, maybe Luca didn't prepare for that. Maybe Luca wasn't prepared for Pollen Puff Calyrex. I know I wouldn't. Having those small things and the extra move that might create a new line that Luca has to consider might be brain power that Luca has to spend now in this match where, he otherwise wouldn't have. And that might to be Carlos's advantage. So it really can go either way, right? It's kind of like, I believe there's like a mental state where, if there's 3 flavors of ice cream, right, it's very easy to pick from those rather than if there's 18, right? So that one extra move or that one extra flavor of ice cream kind of creates a predicament where Luca has more brain power that he has to spend.
Yeah, absolutely. A ton of what decides these matches is just who's able to use the 45 seconds per turn more efficiently. And I think there is absolutely this double-edged sword of when you're really practiced with a standard team, there's so much more you can do in those 45 seconds. But some of that work might not apply as well as soon as somebody changes a few things. They have Pollen Puff, they have Taunt, they have Fake Tears on the Whimsicott. And so it's going to be interesting to see whether Luca's able to leverage mainly the positives, or if those little slight adjustments wind up really requiring a lot more brain power from that side.
But we're going to finally hop into game here of Luca Ceribelli versus Carlos Cabal, as Luca leads off with the Miraidon and the Whimsicott, setting up a Tailwind there, it looks like, to get the speed advantage against the Miraidon from Carlos's end, as the Ogerpon there goes for a helping hand, wanting to boost up that potential Astral Barrage, as Whimsicott actually, instead of the Tailwind, goes to the Light Screen, valuing that damage mitigation instead of the speed control, as Astral Barrage coming off from Carlos's Calyrex does so much damage there to the Whimsicott and Calyrex, even still.
Yeah, so that Light Screen really keeping that Calyrex up from otherwise, or sorry, that Miraidon up, I should say, from otherwise being just completely KO'd by the Astral Barrage. But a nice KO from Luca that comes out here, getting rid of that Ogerpon. At pretty heavy cost to the Miraidon, but with the option to now set up Tailwind for the future. So a nice just trade of damage, getting rid of an important defensive tool on Carlos losing that Ogerpon, but so much damage on the Miraidon that it should be pretty easy to pick off later if Carlos is able to get even one more attack.
Yeah, and I think having the Life Orb here just lets you do so much damage, and Raging Bolt being the perfect third pick here for Carlos, swapping in both of these Pokemon are, in risk of getting knocked out by an Astral Barrage. And with Raging Bolt, nothing from Luca's side is really going to be able to swap in either. Maybe if you bring in the Ursaluna and are immune, but to both attacks actually, but besides that, you don't really have a good swap here. And with Terastallization on Carlos' side as well, you can amplify that damage even more, and this could very quickly steamroll in Carlos' favor.
So Carlos is definitely coming out with all the stops in terms of damage, but hasn't taken KOs yet. And I think Luca's done a really good job of making sure that like a Pokemon at 1 hit point can do just as much as a Pokemon at full. And so just timing that light screen to keep them right on up, timing this Tailwind now to maybe be able to get off one more attack, gives a lot of options. Well, we are going to see a Terrestrialization here from the Raging Bolt, going to become an electric type, potentially really powering up a Thunderclap or Thunderbolt option. If Carlos wanted to take a KO, this sure is the way to do it.
And part of me thinks that Carlos maybe is clicking something like Thunderclap, but no, it's not. Draco Meteor going to be the move of choice. Not able to pick up the KO on Calyrex most notably, and this Astro Barrage now is going to be able to get a double knockout into Luca's Pokemon. And that's absolutely huge because you didn't get rid of the Calyrex, and now you've lost 2 Pokemon for it. Yes, you have Light Screen set up, and yes, you have you have Tailwind up and Light Screen, but Carlos just got 2 of your Pokemon, one of them being a restricted, and this Raging Bolt's at full HP. This is super scary if you're in Luca's position, but definitely not unplayable depending on what's in the back.
Yeah, it's a really big gamble that Luca's taking just on the board state, saying, if I have Light Screen up, if I have Tailwind up, I know that I can finish this game. Luca also still has Terrestrialization, which might be really important for trying to make it through this Raging Bolt. As we see that Electric Seed activating, not super relevant now, but maybe relevant if there's a Zamazenta in the back. Luca definitely down in terms of Pokemon count here, but I think with the Tailwind and the Light Screen, depending on how much that Thunderclap does into a Terrestrialized Urshifu, I think Luca's in prime position to immediately convert back some KOs here.
Yeah, and I mean, we see a Terrestrialization here on Luca. In an attempt to respond to Carlos's, Terra Ghost there is going to make your Choice Bandit Urshifu not take super effective damage from this Thunderclap, which otherwise would just straight up knock it out as a one-hit KO. Close combat there, not able to knock out the Raging Bolt either. Carlos's Pokemon just, built to live these attacks, and it's super nice as the Moongeist Beam there is able to finish off the Calyrex Shadow, thanks to that Tailwind, outspeeding it. But the problem now is that this Raging Bolt is going to get to fire off an attack, assumably that Thunderbolt there. And if this is into the Urshifu, even with Terra Ghost, I'd be surprised if it does live the turn, as it does not, thanks to that Electric Terrain, the Booster Energy, and the Terrestrialization. Regardless of the Terra, Luca's Urshifu is going to finally go down, and Carlos is going to still maintain a lead.
So a lead definitely maintained here. Getting that KO is really crucial, but with Zamazenta as the last Pokemon on Carlos' side of the field, and Lunala still comfortably as a Ghost type, I don't know where the damage is going to come from Carlos to close this out. The Raging Bolt can try to get one more good Electric type attack off. It's going to protect this turn, but the Lunala calls that and gets a Moongeist Beam. It's going to be just really tough unless this Raging Bolt can get off a spectacular attack into Lunala to be able to actually finish off this game. Shadow Shield's broken now, so there's an option to try to get off Booster Energy, Electric Terrain, Thunderclap. But short of that getting close to a KO, I'm not sure. It's an open question. Carlos is really relying on what this Raging Bolt can do through Light Screen with that Thunderclap. Is it going to KO? Not even.
It's not going to KO, but it's going to do a lot of damage still. I think Carlos making the correct decision there, taking advantage of the Electric Terrain. You either, you lose so much power anyways, but make it up for it in the terrain, that it's fine. And yeah, that Heavy Slam does so much damage as well, as regardless of how this turn plays out, Carlos always attacking with both Pokemon there makes too much sense, because now the Lunala is in range of both of attacks, either the Heavy Slam or the Thunderclap there. So that's going to be game 1 for Carlos in a very convincing manner. That was a very quick game as well. For as much hype as we talked about the analysis as well, just leading into that game 1, I think it's still worth mentioning that analysis, because none of those turns and none of those quick plays happen without any of that thought process, right? Without thinking of, oh, I know this is going to do this much damage, or I know this is how normally people play. Carlos can never make those plays. So positioning the Pokemon the way that Carlos did was really impressive still. And even though it was a quick loss for Luca, I think was still really well played by him as well. Just maybe not worked out in his favor. I think if you maybe position the Lunala in another way to maybe have a bit more defensive backbone so that Calyrex doesn't immediately roll over your lead, could be seen as an adjustment for Luca in this game too. But I'm really curious to your thoughts, Hayden, and maybe how both players can adjust in this game too.
maybe the biggest piece of information that neither of the players had before this game one was just exactly how that damage trade was going to work out. Like, is a close combat from Choice Band Urshifu going to finish off the Raging Bolt? How much damage is the Raging Bolt going to do back in return? Can Lunala finish off Zamazenta with enough Moongeist beams? And I think now that those questions are more solidly answered, Luca can see that the damage trades that he was aiming for just aren't actually enough to be able to handle this really well-placed Raging Bolt that Carlos has been using. I think Luca played a perfectly fine game at the start to sort of position these two powerful attackers to try to close things out at the end, but it was just not quite enough damage and taking a little bit too much in return from the Raging Bolt. So both players are looking for even just a small technical adjustment to get a little more damage so that this game might be able to switch. Carlos is hoping things just go exactly the same, or maybe there's a few small adjustments to stop what Luca's doing.
Yeah, and a little bit of an adjustment we will see, but hopefully from both players. But Miraidon and Whimsicott being the choice of lead there from Luca, and Carlos sticking with the Ogre Pawn and the Calyrex. I think having the option to go for that Helping Hand Astral Barrage is just too great, because if Luca doesn't go for the Light Screen turn one and instead opts for a Tailwind, we know that even the Draco Meter isn't able to get the knockout there into Carlos's Calyrex. So the Helping Hand Astral Barrage just makes way too much sense, and the Whimsicott here is forced to go for that Light Screen to even live the turn, and Carlos here doesn't actually go for Helping Hand. Instead, Astral Barrage. Maybe this is a double up there with the Ogre Pawn to finish off one of the Pokemon on Luca's side, but Draco Meteor is going to miss the Ogre Pawn, and that's a huge damage that Luca just doesn't have anymore, as Ivy Cudgel from Carlos follows up into the Whimsicott there, knocking it out.
That might be game losing, because there's no longer the Tailwind pressure from the Whimsicott. That would have been so phenomenally helpful for Luca to just get that KO on the Ogre Pawn, finish it off, make sure that it can't do any more of those Helping Hands of Follow Me's or Ivy Cudgels. Lunala is definitely what you need in the back to be able to try to turn this around, though. It stops the Astral Barrage as the pressure, but it is a little bit scary for Luca here, knowing that this Calyrex with a Helping Hand Psychic could just completely KO the Miraidon no matter what the Lunala does. There's a ton of predictions that Luca is going to have to come up with to try to get out from a really disastrous Draco Meteor mess.
Yeah, and we see Luca here maybe hovering an attack on the Calyrex to see if Carlos tries to play it safe and target down into the Miraidon with something like the Helping Hand Psychic, as you mentioned. But if this is just an Astral Barrage from Carlos, that could be game-winning as well. It is just the Astral Barrage! Helping Hand there is going to fire off into both Pokemon. That's almost a double knockout, but Lunala barely hangs on at 8 HP.
Don't think it's going to matter. Lunala's going to hang on. It's going to be able to get off a Moongeist Beam. Calyrex doesn't need that special attack boost for any longer, though. This, even with the KO, having Lunala at only 8 hit points with an Ogre Pawn sitting there, happy to finish it off with an Ivy Cudgel, I think it's going to be game over for Luca, unfortunately. That was such a phenomenal read from Carlos' side, going for the Astral Barrage, even with the risk of the Wide Guard, saying, look, I know that you're worried about the Helping Hand Psychic. You cannot afford to go for a Wide Guard from this far behind. I'm just going to finish off the game and go for the Astral Barrage. Definitely paid off here, and Carlos has all but cemented the end of this game, I think. With being able to KO that Lunala, the Lunala can't even protect itself, and I think Luca's just locking in a forfeit here.
And I am just astounded here at the level of gameplay from Carlos. This is exactly what I want to see here at the World Championships. I want to see plays like that. I want to see the amount of pressure that Carlos was able to commit in that game one, and then converting it into a game two game plan where he was able to exert pressure somewhere else. And honestly, I'm tripping over my words because that was a phenomenal game from Carlos.
Yeah, I think we talked a lot about the precise decision-making and familiarity that players have, but there's also something to be said for just making those calls right and figuring out when the right moment to just sort of make a read is. And that was a masterclass of doing that from Carlos, just like a phenomenally timed Astral Barrage. Really unfortunate for Luca to have to deal with the Draco Meteor miss. I think that game looks totally different otherwise, but still, you have to take those advantages and convert them into wins as quickly as possible when playing against someone as powerful as Luca. And I think Carlos really showed a lot of respect to his opponent for trying to close that game out quickly, not just sort of assuming that he would win because of the luck.
Yeah, and I mean, the Draco Meteor was already kind of a sealed in the game, but you know, the fact that Carlos continued to make aggressive plays like that Astro Barrage and Helping Hand in front of a wide guard user is just amazing. And it really goes to show is like all that analysis that we talked about isn't happening then, it's happening in the builder, and it's happening in their mind before the game even begins. So that when you're in the game, we saw how quickly both of the players were locking in their moves. They were able to then act upon those instincts and act upon those plans that they set up before, and those game plans, because maybe Carlos was able to, you know, think about that and realize that, okay, even if my Pokemon goes down, I still have a Zamazenta in the back. I still have a game plan in the back, and making plays like that and recognizing maybe where it goes is just really, really impressive.
Yeah, absolutely. I think there's a way that wins the game on the spot, and it doesn't often lose the game on the spot. So it was a nice way to just sort of play and try to convert a good position into a win as quickly as possible. So it was really nice to see Carlos just like sort of capitalizing on things, having like a really solid game plan into this opposing team, and just managing those damage trades so impeccably well in this game.
Yeah, and I think we did a great job of analyzing the game. I think, funny enough, the games that were the quickest or that weren't shown in James's case, we did the most analysis for, and then were either quick or weren't shown. But I think that's a great job on both of the players there to execute on that analysis that we provided there. And I think that was a phenomenal game to wrap out the day. Kind of quick and sweet as well, to really, really showcase the level of Worlds gameplay.
Yeah, absolutely. So we have a couple more Swiss rounds tomorrow into Top Cut. We're going to be happy to showcase a bunch of exclusive feature matches that won't be shown on the mainstream. They'll be start stream matches that we'll be able to showcase tomorrow. Both Luca and Carlos are going to be competing there. Luca from 6-2, if he can win 2 more, he'll still make Top Cut. Carlos just needs to win 1. So much action next week or tomorrow, I should say, that we're really excited to showcase to everybody. I can't believe there's this much Pokemon in just one weekend. It's very exciting.
But I do think that